Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. Andy, are you there?
I'm here.
I need to start with a cinema report from Portland.
Oh, okay.
I've been to the cinema. I have seen what it hath wrought.
Tell me, but don't spoil anything, because I have not been to the cinema.
It hath wrought Genesis.
Uh-huh.
It hath spelt it incorrectly, but it hath wrought it.
Right.
And it hath torn the franchise asunder.
Even more so than the previous one?
Andy, Oh man, I need to start with this. I've captured two things in the cinema this week. The first one was a recommendation from our film buddy Steve Sarmento, who said, "Make sure you go see Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl."
Right.
Okay. I don't want to talk about that because I thought it was such a fine film. Even I am not interested in spoiling it until you see it.
Okay. I haven't seen it. I don't even think it's playing near me.
Delightful.
Well, good. I look forward to one day seeing it.
You should see it one day. Now, then I would like to talk about Terminator Genisys because, as a child of 1984, a teen in 1984, I have a heart that is full of love for Terminator and Terminator 2.
Yes.
And that love begins to deteriorate, to wane through 3 and 4. And I was hopeful when I saw the first trailer of Terminator Genisys that maybe there was a chance, there was a shot. I should have known. I should have allowed that natural cynicism to step in and say, Pete, don't be a dummy. You're going to have that heart fully broken. And it was fully broken. This film is like this shoebox full of memories of vastly superior movies. It's this heartbreaking disappointment. It's like it was made by people who are happy living up to a collection of Terminator greatest hits clips on YouTube. That's what it feels like. Like all they know about Terminator is what they've seen in 3-minute clips on YouTube. It is horrible. It is terrible. It should not be seen.
Wow.
It was, and I got a few chuckles out of Arnold, who ends up being a glorified set piece. He is really poorly used in this film. They give him this stupid smile line, which he uses way too often. The script was so bad. It's terrible. I would have loved to have seen Emilia Clarke in a film where that was able to showcase that sort of Sarah Connor strength that I remember from episodes 1 and 2, in a way that was not hampered by this boat anchor of a script. I mean, it was just awful. So, yeah, it was, it is junk. It's so disappointing. So disappointing. And it's disappointing because the people who are in it, I like the people, and I want the best for those people. I want them to be successful. I want Jai Courtney to be a successful action star. I want him to be that. I do. I want him to see some material that'll let him just do the thing. Okay, let me say one thing. If I have to find one nice thing to say, the way they reproduce the 1984 stuff, they go back and forth between, many different timelines, and they really, I think, do a good job of recreating stuff that was in the first film in 1984. It really looked great. I don't think they were using that film and intercutting any material from that. I think they rebuilt it, and it was great. Right. I thought they did a good job. But that's like...
How do they do on Bill Paxton's part?
35 seconds. I can't talk to you about it. So bad, the whole thing.
That's too bad.
So that was what I needed to talk about there.
Well, speaking of bad movies... I may not have made it to the theater, but I did finally get to watch Transformers: Age of Extinction.
Oh, I remember hardly anything about that film. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was one of those late night streaming movies that I'm like, I'll just turn this on and maybe I'll fall asleep to it. And then I just couldn't fall asleep because it was just bad, and just one of those things. My brain doesn't shut off when I'm watching a bad movie for some reason. And so there it was, 2.5 hours later. I'm just like, why was this so long? And what was the point? But yeah, so maybe Terminator Genisys will end up falling into that camp, and it'll keep me up late one night.
That would be a sad but probably best use for that film. See it when it'll be good. You should be sick. Wait until you're really ill.
Right.
really ill, heavily medicated, and then it'll be perfect.
Ah, that's too bad.
All right. What else do we have? We have some follow-up?
Yeah, we do have a few little notes to follow up on from one from good old Stephen Smart, who replied to our Ninotchka post over on Facebook and said, Ninotchka is probably my least favorite Garbo. My favorite would probably be Queen Christina, but there are some great films in her short filmography. As for Lubitsch, everyone needs to watch Trouble in Paradise for some pre-code goodness. And that's one that we didn't bring up. That's not one I have seen, and I definitely need to put that one on my radar because it's one of the Lubitsch's that I've heard about quite a bit, but have just not gotten around to.
I'm not sure. I think maybe the Gone with the Wind effect may have impacted our appreciation for Ninotchka in a way that did not agree with, obviously, the good Stephen Smart, but others as well.
Right. Yeah. Ben Lott over at the Blot Spot said, where I didn't agree with you. Pretty much everything. I was genuinely shocked when you started talking positive about this movie. There was nothing that worked for me. It was a romantic comedy that was neither romantic nor comedic. And Greta Garbo's performance, ugh! To paraphrase the great Roger Ebert, to call her character cardboard would be an insult to a useful packing material. How am I supposed to believe Melvin Douglas fell for that monotone and extraordinary bland woman? I'm happy that they could advertise that Garbo laughs. At least she was having fun with Ninotchka. Your ranking 161 out of 191. My ranking 189. So, not a fan.
Not a fan. You know what's funny is just, I think we may have reviewed it highly, and I am willing to admit that the Gone with the Wind effect had impacted me on that. I think if we were to do the show again, even now, I may not be as kind to it. I disagree. I thought she was charming. I liked her smile. I liked their romance. It happened too quickly, but it's a 1939 light comedy. I'm okay with that. I felt good about it, but I still feel like 161 out of 191 is a pretty darn good place for it.
Yeah, I agree, and we may have been praising it positively, but I mean, it was very light, and it's not something that was going to certainly crack the top 100.
Absolutely.
So I agree. I can see where Ben's coming from, but I am okay with where it landed, considering I still enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yep. And how about the good? What did you have? Something else?
Oh, just then Alex Hammond.
Hammond. There's two N's.
Haman?
Might be Haman.
Haman. I'm not quite sure, Alex. Sorry we're butchering your last name. But you also left us a message over on Facebook. Said, hey guys, great show. Burned through all of the episodes, admittedly minus the ones about movies I have never watched, in just a few months. Sometimes listening to 2 episodes in a single day. That's a lot of us
I'm
to take.
so sorry.
Yes. Still, one question keeps me up at night. Why no American Hustle?
Ooh, Andy, why no American Hustle?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's just it hasn't been built into any list. It would be an interesting film to talk about. I think David O. Russell can certainly make some interesting films. And American Hustle, I just realized that his name rhymes with the title and cracked myself up. David O. Russell, good old American Hustle. He makes some very interesting films. Certainly, I would say Three Kings would probably be my favorite in his filmography. But
I think I like
a lot of.
I think I like more movies of his than you do, right?
I think so, probably.
Yeah. Because I know he's a controversial director, but American Hustle, Silver Linings Playbook, The Fighter, Three Kings, obviously. Flirting with Disaster. Did I like that movie?
That was fun. I thought it was kind of fun. Ben Stiller and
that's right. I
Mary
did.
Tyler Moore.
Yes, absolutely. Taglioni.
Yeah.
I do love that Taglioni. I think it is worth talking about David O. Russell's films, and probably worth doing even a mini series. But I would absolutely strike I Heart Huckabees from the list. Man, did I have problems with that film.
That's. I remember thinking it was a very interesting film, but I remember nothing about it.
Yeah, well, that says it all.
Yeah.
So
his other films, I mean, I enjoy, but I don't think he's ever topped Three Kings, even though his most recent films are the ones he's getting all the accolades for.
Three Kings was stellar. Really stellar. Yeah. All right. Well, I agree with Alex, and I think we need to rectify this in the coming soons.
The coming soon.
In the coming soon. You know, I was showing off I was at dinner and I was showing off. Somebody asked me about that we were sitting at dinner, and she turns around and she says, "So, you know, how far ahead do you know?" And so I brought up the Google spreadsheet on our phone that takes us into 2020. and so I don't know when we're going to shuffle David O. Russell in there, but I think we should. I'm in favor of it.
Okay, well, I'm happy to chat about that when it comes around. I think it's great getting listener feedback like this so that we can throw options in the mix that we hadn't thought of. So thank you very much for sending that message over to us, Alex.
Yes, thank you, Alex, and thanks for listening. Even though you're listening to 2 a day, I'm sorry about that. I'm sure there's the bends are probably playing into you.
Yes, make sure you come up
decompress,
slowly.
Come up slowly. Did you want to talk about dead people?
There have been a few deaths lately,
so
and it's horrible. I can't remember if we brought up James Horner a few weeks ago, but that's just horribly tragic. Just everything about how he died, and at the age, I mean, he had such a long career still ahead of him. So it's just tragic that he died in a plane crash. And my heart definitely goes out to him and his family. And it's just a rough time. But then, recently there have been a few other people who have passed away, and it's it's really kind of heartbreaking. One was, kind of probably for both of us, a little bit of a boyhood crush, I would say. I don't know about you, but Can't Buy Me Love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amanda Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
I think pretty much everyone was kind of in love with her. All the guys were in love with her. She was just a cute little thing. And then she was also in Explorers. I think actually that's where I saw her before Can't Buy Me Love.
Wow.
And and then she kind of retired from acting. And I know she had gone in and out of some drug issues and things like that. But I don't know if that. I don't think anything's been released yet as far as what the cause of death was for her.
Oh, it's such a shame.
Yeah, and she was back up in Greeley, Colorado, hanging out in my old stomping ground right by Fort Collins. So, sad to hear about that.
That is really sad. Who else was on your list? You had 3 on your list. James Horner, super sad. Amanda Peterson, can't believe it.
And then the third one is Irwin Keyes.
Irwin Keyes.
Who's not a name that people probably remember. But he's a face. He's just a very memorable face for people who have seen him in movies. He's hard to forget his look because he's just got a very definable look. The film that I most remember him for
Flintstones.
was not Flintstones, although he
House of a Thousand Corpses.
He was in both of those.
Black
and
Dynamite.
House of a Thousand Corpses. Oh, you. No, it was actually Intolerable Cruelty, the Coen Brothers film.
Oh,
yeah, which
that's
is
right.
it was kind of a weird one for them, but I still kind of like it. But he was Wheezy Joe, I can't remember. He was like an asthmatic asthmatic hitman or something like that. And I just really loved him in that film. But he kind of got started around the time of The Warriors, way back in the late 70s with Walter Hill's film, and just had a face that people loved to cast in really interesting character sorts of roles. So he just passed away as well at the age of 63.
Oh, it's too bad. You're right. He is a utility face. He's been in a ton of stuff, and it's good to go back and pay your respects. Go rent Black Dynamite or House of a Thousand Corpses, 2003, or The Flintstones.
Or Intolerable Cruelty. Or The Warriors.
All right. Let's see. Do we have any other old news? Nothing else?
I don't think there's any other news.
All right. I think then we should finally tell the people where we're from.
Where are we from?
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, everybody.
And we spoil movies tonight. On the show, our third in our series on the great films of 1939 with Frank Capra's political charmer, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Before we do that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe on iTunes or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. And if you, too, are a sucker for lost causes, then you're also the kind of person who should head over to Instagram.com/TheNextReel and play The Next Reel's Instagram, #PonyPrize, #GuessTheMovie Challenge. And for that, we're off to merry Scotland for a full report from the Supreme Commander of all things around questionable ponies, Stephen Smart.
Hey guys, it's Stephen here again from the Instagram Guess the Movie Pony Prize Challenge. Well, like a Scottish heatwave, it was over before it started, after @Nell2 spotted nurse Jessica Lange lurking in the background of Image 2. This week's movie was Tootsie, a comedy from 1982, directed by Sidney Pollack. It stars Dustin Hoffman, who is supported by Terry Garr and Bill Murray, and the film also features the first appearance of Gina Davis. It's great stuff. So congrats @Nell2, well played, and you're entered to win the Pony Prize. And thanks to everyone who took part this week, and if you haven't already, why not join in? The more the merrier. And as always, a new challenge starts Friday, and so thanks guys, and see you later.
Do you like having this Stephen Smart report, Andy?
I love it. I mean, I miss getting to be a part of it, but
you'll always
I should say I miss getting to revel in the glory for Steve, but oh, it's just terrible. No, I actually absolutely love having him be more of a part of the show. So it's great. I'm thrilled, and I can't believe it took us this long to figure it out.
I know. It is my favorite. The time zone kills us. We've been wanting to have Stephen be more of a part of the show forever. He does a ton of work managing the Pony Prize and working on Instagram, and we just so deeply appreciate it. I'm so glad to be getting these field reports all the way from Scotland. So once again, thanks to Stephen for being a part of it, and thanks to everybody for playing. Make sure you head over Instagram.com/thenextreel, join up, and guess the movie. Super fun.
Absolutely.
And he's pretty good. He is pretty good.
Yeah, I love his pictures.
Andy, it's time. Let's do those trailers. I am stunned, Andy. I am shocked and awed. Wait a minute. You know what? I'm going back to the transcript. So I say for the trailer, I'm all over Creed in Slack. I say, I'm going to do Creed as a trailer, and I'm ready for you to say, oh, I can't wait for that. And what do you say? You say, you put on your pipe and your smoking jacket, and you say, oh, yes, looks interesting. I'm so behind on the Rocky movies. I've only seen the first one. And I say, all caps, what? ! Man, your list of shame is non-trivial. And you say, again, shockingly, oddly, I don't feel any shame about missing the other Rocky movies. Smirky, winky face. Shock, Andy. I'm not saying all of the Rocky movies are great, but Rocky 2, Rocky 3, you're missing some pop culture resonance to the nth, man.
I know. Oh. What do you want to hear? I'll watch them for you.
I'm still waiting for your predestination report. You know.
It's sitting by my TV. It's waiting for me.
Yeah,
I watched Transformers instead, though.
Oh, my God.
Actually, no. I take that back. I was out of state when I watched Transformers. I wasn't near predestination.
My film, Creed, is I think the sequel that we may need in the Rocky franchise. That's what I'm going to say. Former heavyweight world champ Rocky Balboa serves as a trainer and mentor to Adonis Creed, son of his late friend and former rival Apollo Creed. I'll tell you what I love about the trailer. I love the trailer because they launched the trailer on its own merits. We don't see Rocky until the very end. And I'm sure that he'll play a much bigger part in the film, but I love that writer-director Ryan Coogler holds Michael B. Jordan to his own craft and his own body, his muscles, his strength, and they let him showcase a little bit in the trailer before they give it over to Sylvester Stallone. I felt really great watching this trailer, and I hope it's not another. Please don't let it be another Terminator. Just Terminator destruction of my youth.
Yeah, but you have to, I mean, going into a Rocky movie, you already kind of acknowledge that there are many stumbles.
Yes, you certainly do. But I also can say I really liked Fruitvale Station. I can say that out loud. Yes, I can say that out loud. So I can also say that I like Michael B. Jordan. I loved Chronicle, right? I loved that he was in there. Obviously, he was in Fruitvale Station. I am a fan of him being in Fantastic Four. I like the look of him. I think he's making some good choices. So I feel like we have the makings of something that could be awesome. Really could be awesome. And Felicia Rashad, man. Felicia Rashad.
I actually really agree with you. I think this looks really interesting. I love the direction they're taking. I think it's very smart going this route to kind of continue the Rocky franchise by finding a way to bring it down in age.
Yep.
And, well, not necessarily age like, oh, we have to make it for the younger audiences. I didn't mean it that way. I just mean it seemed like Sylvester Stallone wanted to keep making these, but it seemed like he kind of passed a point where he should be, but he was still making them.
Yes, I think that's probably true.
And I think the what was the boxing movie, Grudge Match? Is that what it was with him and Robert De Niro?
Yeah, I think so.
As
it was
kind
not
of the Rocky versus Raging Bull sort of kind of blend, kind of a mashup of those two as old boxers fighting. I think that was kind of the tipping point where we said, okay, he should probably not be in any more boxing movies. But this is a really great way to bring that back around and actually get a chance to continue this franchise.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the same thing. You could say the same thing about Rambo. I mean, that incredibly, wildly violent romp that he took in the last Rambo film.
Right.
But the Rocky wasn't the Rocky Balboa, the last one in 2006. Was that the street fight one?
I don't know.
Oh, you haven't seen? Oh, of course, you haven't seen them. Ugh,
yeah.
You make me sick. Anyway, I am looking forward to this film, and it is coming out November 25th, 2015. What's yours?
Excellent. Mine is The Finest Hours, a new Disney film based on a true story of when a Coast Guard has to make a daring rescue off the coast of Cape Cod after a pair of oil tankers are destroyed during a blizzard in 1952. It looks really gripping. It looks like another take on the whole perfect storm. What would you call that genre? Disaster at sea?
Yeah,
genre?
Like the Lost at Sea kind of a thing.
Yeah. It's big, epic struggle of a whole bunch of men, sailors trapped on these two boats trying to figure out how to survive. And you've got a bunch of people on the boats. You've got a little rescue boat that's not quite big enough to fit them all. How are you going to save all these people? It looks really, it looks like a really safe, exciting sort of movie. I say that in the best possible way. It looks like they're making a really interesting true story sort of film that's going to grip the audience, and it's going to, at the end, relieve us as we see a wonderful success. I'm assuming it's going to be a success. It just has that vibe that, I kind of like. I get into those sorts of movies sometimes. Chris Pine is in it. Ben Foster's in it. Eric Bana. Holiday Granger. You've got Casey Affleck is in it. And Abraham Ben-Ruby, who I worked on Ambush at Dark Canyon, he's in it. And it, I don't know, it's got a vibe that I kind of like. And, there's something about big disaster movies that even if it has issues, I still enjoy. Because, it's like the whole Poseidon Adventure sort of factor. It just makes it for fun watching.
I'm with you. You know who does a pretty good Cape Cod? That Chris Pine.
He actually does.
Straight out of Brewster.
Not only that, but he also looked like he came straight out of the 50s. So
yeah,
he worked
he did
really well on both counts.
I'm with you on all these things. I love seeing Eric Bana in this film. I was a big fan of Eric. I was a big fan of Eric Bana's Hulk. I said it. So I'm glad to see him in this film. But mostly all I could think about, and Casey Affleck too. Shout out to Casey Affleck, because friend of the show. But it was at Chris Pine that I am most excited to see in this movie, and I'm most excited to see the work that he is doing. Man, that guy is making choices, just all the right choices, to not be locked into Captain Kirk. And I think he's just such a smart actor. In terms of managing his brand. And I'm very excited to see, everything he does. I'm surprised.
I agree. I think he has a lot of fun playing with all of his different roles, whether it's being the prince in Into the Woods, or trying his hand at, even though we didn't like it, but trying his hand at being the more serious, thinking-minded Jack Ryan, something like that, or going way back to something like Carriers, which came out the same year as Star Trek, which I thought was just a fantastic, very intense, creepy indie horror film.
Yep, I absolutely agree. And I don't like horror.
But that's a good one.
That's a good one.
That's a creepy one.
Yep.
Yes, it is. So yes, that's Christopher Whitelaw Pine leading the charge in The Finest Hours, which comes out, unfortunately, this is the downside, is it's coming out January 29th next year.
Oh, geez.
I'm hoping that changes, because I don't want to think that this is going to be a stinker just because it has a January release date.
Andy?
Yes.
Listen. The simpleton of all time, a big-eyed patriot, he knows Washington and Lincoln by heart. He stood at attention in the governor's presence, collects stray boys and cats.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is a significant picture. It is significant because it emphasizes democracy in action. I consider it a real privilege and a real experience to have played even a minor part under the distinguished direction of Frank Capra.
By far the greatest picture of filmdom's top director, 3-time winner of the coveted Academy Award, the most timely, the most vital, the most significant picture ever to come out of Hollywood. A homespun boy and a hard-boiled, worldly wise girl in a picture carved out of the everyday lives of everyday Americans, with those inimitable Capra overtones of drama, laughter, and romance, plus the finest supporting cast ever assembled.
Oh, Andy, Mr. Smith, please tell me that I'm not completely bamboozled. I'm under the Ninotchka curse, and that I'm not alone in delightfully loving this film.
You're not. And I think that, I haven't seen either of the next two films that we're going to be talking about, The Roaring Twenties or Only Angels Have Wings, but I have a sense that this is going to be the top of my 1939 list. And I think it's just a top film. This is such a solid film. I think it's so heartwarming. It's so honest and just so touching and funny and just such a great film to watch. And it still is something that is actually relevant too.
Oh, absolutely. I put this on, I started it the night before yesterday. And, I put it on around 7:30. I was just watching it in the living room, and I thought, this is going to be my strategy. I just want to see if I can con my family into joining me for this film. And my daughter walks in, and the first thing she says is, ugh, black and white? Right? I got the eye roll. I said, yeah, I know you're not interested. So that's it. I'm silent. And then she sits down on the arm of the sofa. And my son comes in. My son, he's like, why is it all, because it's on the, the HD TV and it's pillar boxed. He says, why is it all squishy? Oh, well, it's an old movie. Ugh. And they're both sitting down. Hour and 10 minutes later, when I have to turn it off because it's bath time, they're both absolutely riveted in the politics of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I conned them both into watching it. We finished it last night. They loved it.
Awesome.
Right?
That's so great to hear.
Such a relief. Such a relief. I feel like I've done something really good in the universe today. 1939, it is a political comedy drama, of course, starring the young James Stewart and Jean Arthur. Adorable Jean Arthur. About this Midwestern guy goes to Washington and has a bigger impact than anybody ever imagined. It is a celebration of the filibuster. and it is practically a documentary on the evil, dark underbelly of the business impact on politics in Washington. So it stood up well to you.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. Yeah, and I had watched this fairly recently, maybe a couple months ago, 2 or 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it then. I was excited to watch it again. It's one of those films that it's just, I mean, it's a Frank Capra film. I think his films stand the test of time so well because he really taps into the characters and this level of honesty with the characters that just make them so easy to watch and so easy to connect with. I had just a very easy time connecting with, what was the last film that we talked about of his? Why did I just blank on it? It Happened One Night.
We did talk about that.
Which
yeah.
I absolutely loved. And likewise with this film. They're just so easy to connect with. And this one has so much more going for it. I mean, not that I don't love It Happened One Night, but this one has so much more going for it because it actually is a look at our political system in the country. And I'm sure at the time, Capra was feeling much more positive about, there's just this one corrupt senator, and this Mr. Smith is going to kind of turn things around and straighten everything out. I'm sure he wasn't realizing that as time went by, there'd be more and more corrupt senators corrupted by corporate interests and everything. But it's just so interesting to look at now and look at our political system to just really get a glimpse at the dark side of what ours has become. And really now it's more, could our political system ever actually have a real Mr. Smith in it now? I'm not even sure a real Mr. Smith would even get elected.
Would even bother, exactly. Real Mr. Smith wouldn't even give it a shot. But what's so funny when you look at it the way you just described it, it's almost like you can see the people who watched this film and said, "Wow, that Jim Taylor, what a role model." You mean we can do that?
Right. Yes, the Donald Trumps of the world.
Textbook. Are you telling me that because I have enough? You mean really? It's like shock and awe felt across the land. I love it.
What's funny is that Joseph P. Kennedy, who is President Kennedy's father at the time, and actually had been in the Hollywood system for a time. He was actually, I believe, in Europe at the time this came out. And I can't remember what he was doing. He was like some liaison.
He was the ambassador to Great Britain.
Was the ambassador?
Yep.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he was the ambassador. He actually told them that, you shouldn't release this in Europe. It's going to affect our relations with these countries because they're going to think we're corrupt. They're going to look down on the American system and all that. And it's just so funny that he did that because he himself was a Jim Taylor. Like if you look at his business dealings and the way that he strategized all of his business that he did before and after his politics, he was Jim Taylor.
This is the impact of this one surprised me as I was reading about it. The impact from the Hayes office. Does that surprise you at all that there was some concern from the Hayes office about this film? For me, it seems, and obviously I'm watching it with the benefit of nearly 100 years of media behind me, but media history since the film was released. But they were concerned that this film would degrade, would act as a covert attack on the democratic form of government.
It's, yeah, it's sad to say that I'm not surprised, I think. I think what it is that the Hayes office started looking at everything that they could see as potentially damaging in any way or looking at something not in a good light. They started seeing everything as damaging. And I think that's what happened. And I think that's why it ended up collapsing because I think people were finally fed up. I don't know if that's the case, but it seems to me, it just seems they were going down a dark road of accusing. It's just finger pointing,
Yeah, I do. That's the attack on democracy was the initial, was the initial position by the Hayes office. But Joseph Breen who was the head of the office at the time, he reversed course, and I think his comment is one that really is worth noting, that the film is a grand yarn that will do a great deal of good for those who see it, and in my judgment, it is particularly fortunate that this kind of story is to be made at this time. Out of all of Senator Jeff's difficulties, there has been evolved the importance of a democracy, and there is splendidly emphasized the rich and glorious heritage which is ours, and which comes when you have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Which I think is really a sound statement on this film. It is a sweet film, but an important one.
It could be that he was looking at the unpublished story by Lewis Foster before it had been written, because he didn't make that statement until the screenplay had actually been written and submitted. So that's possible. And I mean, I don't know if The Gentleman from Montana, Lewis Foster's unpublished story, has since been published. I didn't look into that, but that could be the reason.
Yeah,
there might have just been a different tone.
Yeah, that's right. And it is interesting, and I think that the film, it does a good job to present an isolated incident and not, it doesn't point out the flaws and the sort of criminal misdeeds of every senator. And I also think it does a pretty darn good job of really highlighting the story of Senator Payne as he kind of explains his evolution from becoming the wide-eyed senator to becoming a guy who is compromised. This is, of course, Senator Payne, played by wonderful Claude Rains in this film. I think this is my favorite role of his.
Oh, you think so?
I think so.
Not the Invisible Man.
I deeply enjoyed this.
He's been so good in so many films.
Yeah.
Claude Rains he's one of my favorites. Anytime I see Claude Rains is in a movie, I know that there's at least one element I'm going to really enjoy.
Yeah.
Because he's just awesome. He's great. And you're right. He's fantastic in this. And in a part that is, it's not blatantly written as somebody who's vocalizing how his transformation is happening as he's kind of changing because of watching what's happening with Jefferson Smith.
Mm-hmm.
There's some great scenes of subtext as we just see his face as he's seeing what Taylor is doing and as he's listening to what's going on, and even as he's sitting there listening to Jeff being accused before the hearing, or when Jeff is doing his filibuster. There are those great scenes of just his face and his reaction, and when Jefferson is looking at him and his eyes just move a little bit, you can read so much guilt in that expression. And it's so great the way he plays that. But then it's just so great when he goes on the attack again. It's like his verbal approach and his outward approach is so aggressive toward Jeff, while when he's not, and you just see his face, you can tell that it's eating him up.
I think that plays into the role of Jeff's journey from naivety to understanding, and I think that's an interesting thing. I was trying to explain it to my kids, the journey from naivete to cynicism, which I think is on display in this film, and yet what James Stewart's role is really there to highlight is the celebration of wisdom. What comes when you have understanding and you don't fall prey to compromise. The scene in which Senator Smith confronts Senator Payne in Payne's office, and we get the sort of mini soliloquy from Payne where he talks about his compromise. That is a pivot, a major pivot, not just in the film, but in Payne's character, because we've seen, the way he works his face. And in fact, I think we've seen his guilt. We see his guilt on display from the very first moment we see Payne and Smith on stage together back in, Montana, when he says, when Smith stands up and says, "I don't think I can do much good because you have such an incredible senator in Payne. He was good friends with my father." And I think right then we see Payne, we see on his face, oh my God, I can't believe I know what we're about to do to this poor guy. I know suddenly what I am is wrong. And that is, I mean, his transformation, his journey leading up to that soliloquy. And I compromised, yes, so that all these years I could stay in that Senate and serve the people in 1,000 honest ways. I think that is, it's like a plea for Jeff to stop and to end the way it does, his storyline, to attempt to kill himself.
Right.
Is and I think the film sort of makes light of that because that sequence is such a celebration, but it's an incredibly sorrowful moment.
It really is, and Frank Capra certainly was not one to ever shy away from suicidal tendencies in his films. It comes up quite frequently throughout his career, and I think that's kind of that level of darkness. This film doesn't go into quite the level of darkness that he goes into in some of his other films, but I think that's where the darkness lies, is in that corruption and how it's basically destroying Payne to the point where he does want to kill himself. And yes, the ending is so victorious when Payne confesses and really, Smith is victorious, and it ends so quickly. All of a sudden, it's just like, and then we're out.
Yeah, the
end. And so you don't really get a chance to do any wrap ups with any of the characters. And so yes, I think that there is an interesting element where we don't really linger, or we don't get to find out more about what happens to Payne, and is he going to end up being okay now? Or does he end up going to an institution because he's driven himself, mad because of this whole thing, or what? We get out of it so quickly. So it's an interesting way to end the story. It feels very abrupt to me.
Yeah.
But and I know there was another ending to the film that did get cut.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. Did you have a chance to read the script?
I didn't look at the script, but I heard them talking about what was in the original ending, and then I guess it just didn't work. I don't think Capra was happy with the audience's reaction with it, so he just...
Yeah, it's interesting because we do, and that was the thing I always think about this at the end of the film. What I really want to see is what happens to Jim Taylor, right? He's the ultimate, mechanic behind all of this, and he's the industrialist, and we see him so actively trying to thwart all the good that is actually happening in the Senate as a result of Senator Smith. And in the original script, there is this sequence where we go back to, hometown, and we're in the middle of we see Saunders and Smith in a parade, a giant parade around, and they've got these, Smith to the Senate for life, and we get Hopper, the governor, saying, I've just begun. I'm going to find more Jefferson Smiths. I'm going to clean out our glorious state of every vestige of James Taylor. And so we get to see that Taylor has been thwarted and the city is free and finally flowing again. And in that moment in this parade, we see that Smith sees Payne standing in the crowd watching the parade. And Smith jumps out of the car and goes and grabs him and says, "This parade is for you too. Come with me and get in the car." And so the two of them, are in this parade together. And then Smith and Saunders go back to his house, and he introduces him to more birds and pets. It's actually very strange. The last line of that cut is, and in the pet shop, Saunders and Jeff are seen entering. On seeing Jeff, the animals go berserk. And in a comparative lull, Jeff says to them, "Meet Clarissa, fellas," and the scene fades out. The end. So, I mean, say what you will about the parade, I can see why they cut that sequence based on that last line alone. Weird Dr. Dolittle feel.
That's so funny. Oh, yeah, I don't quite understand that ending. I mean, I can see the rest of it fitting in, though, and I guess that's, maybe he cut it just because of that one thing, but it does seem strange. I'm not even sure why the audiences wouldn't have been happy seeing that resolution.
Well, that's exactly it, right? It's because you sort of imagine that the audience is keen for a resolution, and that just winning it may come off as a bit unsatisfactory, and that's my feeling. I mean, I this doesn't even satisfy my need to see Jim Taylor squirm. It's fine, and I get it, and I'm glad to end on a win. But Capra is so good at ending on up notes; it just sort of feels weird.
Because the last thing that we really see, one of the last things we see of Jim Taylor is ordering his goons to go attack these children. All of
right.
Smith's boy rangers who are out spreading the good word of Smith, and they're beating these kids up, crashing into their cars, running over their wagons.
That was the worst. He ran over the Boy Ranger wagon.
I know. Then they crash into their car. I was like, man, this is violent.
Right. They run him off the road.
Yeah, it's an intense little sequence. I'm like, man, this Taylor is serious. He really means business. Yeah. Oh my.
Well, do you want to talk about old Edward Arnold? How'd you feel about his performance of the bad guy?
I love Edward Arnold. He is great as this type of character. I mean, he's a great character actor from the period, and that's what he really was known for was character acting. In fact, I think at one point he said that he was giving up trying to get the lead roles in things because people wanted him to lose weight. And so he said, I gave up on that because I didn't want to lose any weight. So I just keep getting fatter and I keep getting better roles. So he said, the bigger I got, the better character roles I received, because he really enjoyed these character roles. And you can just see him totally eating it up in this film. And he was great in You Can't Take It With You. Come and Get It a few years before that. I really loved him in that. But this film, he really is just a no-nonsense, cutthroat businessman who's ready to control Washington and do everything he needs to do to get what he wants.
I agree with you. He is a treat to watch and really just believable all the way through. I mean, he is the industrialist, and even when he's barking out those crazy orders and working the phones himself, getting his reporters to print whatever he wants them to print, he's just diabolical and so overt about it. I mean, he doesn't need to hide any of his machinations. It's just out in the open, and it's just brilliant, and totally buy it.
Yeah, because he knows the only place he really needs to hide his machinations is actually in Congress, and that's why he has Payne doing all of his bidding. Mm-hmm. So he's smart, and he certainly is one who's worked with on and off with Capra a number of times between this and then You Can't Take It With You before this. Meet John Doe after this. They had a good working relationship, so it's always nice to see him on screen.
Let's see, who else do you want to talk about? We skipped James Stewart and Jean Arthur, and I think intentionally.
Well, yeah, James Stewart, come on, he's one of the all-time greats. He really is so easy to watch. I just can watch him do anything. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about him, I think, is that as wonderful as an actor as he was, and really at a point in his career where things were really just getting going, he signed up to go off to war, and he was actually the first big actor to go and do that. So he was a military flyer, and he actually was, I can't remember how many hours, he was flying just a bunch, and I don't know. He's just one of those guys who you got to kind of tip your hat to him, because he really believed in the America of the time and wanted to help Europe and end Nazism and everything. And so he was out there fighting with everyone else.
He was, and it's funny. The timing is funny. This film came out in 1939. He was drafted in 1940 and, served in the military actively until 1959. A long career, and retired a brigadier general.
Yeah. Not completely military. He was on and off making films.
Right. But he was reserves after with the Air Force. He was reserved. But just that's a significant career, a dual career. And you're right. Tip of the hat.
Yeah, it's amazing. I just love. I haven't hit a James Stewart movie that I don't love. He's just so great. Even American Tail, Fievel Goes West. Come on. Gotta love him.
I can't comment, or else I may cry. Boy, Jean Arthur.
Very easy to fall in love with. A very interesting actress, kind of along the lines of Greta Garbo. In fact, people call her kind of the most mysterious actress next to Greta Garbo, because she was really intimidated by the business, and she was somebody who was not wanting to go out onto set because it just made her so nervous, and so she would always hide in her trailer. But she got along so well with Capra. She and Stewart had just worked on You Can't Take It With You right before this one, and she really, he really helped her find a way to get her performances across, and she continued acting until the early 50s when she did Shane, and that was her last film performance. And then she went back and forth from retirement to doing little TV things here and there or stage, but really she kind of was trying to step out of the spotlight. So yeah, she's so good in this. This line from Bill Tekak's review of her. This marvelous screen comedian's best asset was only muffled during her 7 years stint in silent films. That asset? It was, of course, her squeaky, frog-like voice, which silent-era cinema audiences had simply no way of perceiving, much less appreciating. I find that really funny because, in reading some of the other reviews and even some of the community reviews of this film, that comment comes up that, oh my gosh, the film was great, but I hate her voice. I absolutely disagree with that. I find her voice great. First of all, I think it's a wonderful character voice, but perfect for this film. And I think, that you say she was intimidated by set is so funny to me because she comes off as so intimidating in this film. She is the person who knows everything. That voice has such a clear and incisive timbre to it that, when she speaks, you can't help but listen, and it makes it perfect for that Washington insider environment. I love everything about her portrayal of this character. I agree, and I agree about her voice. I find it mesmerizing to listen to.
Yep. And they make a great couple.
Boy, do they. And she's just so good. And I just watched Shane again recently, and she's just so great there. I mean, there's nothing funny in that film. She's just straight up, a Western wife. Mm-hmm. But she just does so good in that one, too. She just carried herself on screen so well, whatever the role. So absolutely a highlight of the film, watching her in this.
Absolutely.
And another great character transformation. Watching her go from the cynical, the person who, as she says to Payne, when I first came to this town, my eyes were big question marks, and now they're green dollar signs. She had gotten cynical at being a part of the system, but through Jeff and watching him win Congress because of his honesty, she actually makes a transformation, and that's just amazing to see.
Should we talk a little bit about Mr. Deeds Goes to Town?
We can.
Well, I mean, because this film, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, was supposed to be a sequel of Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, and obviously that was a Gary Cooper, Jean Arthur film, and this was supposed
Frank Capra.
Frank Capra, and it was only because Gary Cooper was not available that we end up with this, this Smith. They changed the name, they pivot the story, and they put this with Stewart and next to Jean Arthur, and I actually like them as a couple better. I find it a much sweeter engagement than Mr. Deeds.
I do too. I mean, I really like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town also. I think that's another great
I agree.
Capra film.
Yeah.
But this one has, it really does feel like Capra really stepped it up to get this film to where it is, and I guess I think that I'm just glad that this exists rather than Mr. Deeds Goes to Washington.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how you make that transition.
Well,
from...
no, I don't either. I think there's a level of innocence and naivete and small townness that you really buy with Jimmy Stewart at the beginning of this, as he is, kind of introduced to us about 10, 15 minutes into the film. And even as he first arrives in Washington, goes to Congress, everything. I mean, you really get a sense of him as that naive guy. And I think Gary Cooper is great in Mr. Deeds, but I don't quite have that same sense of that naivete.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And you can feel sort of Stewart's Iowa upbringing, I mean, you can feel his roots in this film. He's just so good. What you bring up something really interesting around the script for me, which I think is an interesting point. I mean, in so many ways, this film is such a great example of the hero's journey. And what I love so much about the script is, we don't meet Jefferson Smith. We don't actually see him until, as you say, like 15, 17 minutes into the film. But we get this experience of the old world, right? The world that he's living in through the voices of others without meeting him so well. Like, we know exactly who this guy is, right? The leader of this kind of faux Boy Scouts troop, the Boy Rangers. He is a youth. He's a youth activist. He is, this fabulous scene with Happy... what's his name? Happy Hooper, Hubert Happy Hooper, the governor, and his children. 5 times fast. His children, a cast of 6 boys who love Jefferson Smith and Jefferson Smith's newspaper that he publishes. The cast of boys who is easily, headed up by the wonderful Baby Dumpling. It is the best. I don't know how you end up letting that get in the credits. Actors Larry Sims, but the credits says his Baby Dumpling. Anyway, so these kids tell the story of Jefferson Sims without us ever meeting Jefferson Sims. So we get a picture of exactly who this guy is and how he lives and how he exists in the world as it is before we ever meet him. And I think that's really brilliant. Structurally, it's perfect. So I'm interested in your thoughts on the way the script is built.
No, I think it's great. I mean, it sets up the world for us. And I mean, normally you do introduce the protagonist earlier in your script, but having it designed where you build the political machine and then also the tailor machine, kind of that corporate machine, in the first sequence of the film, so that you really see how all of this stuff is designed, how they've kind of made this system work for them, and what their goal is, and then it gives us it really kind of introduces this curiosity factor. It really hooks the audience in because we know it's called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But we don't know who this Mr. Smith is. We don't know. I mean, sure, we know Jimmy Stewart's in it, but it's like, okay, we want to see what this guy's all about. And now we're kind of on the edge of our seats going, okay, who is it? We don't know what this guy is. They're talking about all these other guys. How does Smith get here? It's a really clever way to begin the film to lead us down a road where we just don't know when we're going to actually get to meet Smith and how he even gets to be a part of this film, because they don't even bring him up. It's not until the kids bring him up around the dinner table, and then there's the fantastic coin flip that the governor does to actually decide that I'm going to pick Smith to be the one who I'm going to send over, where the coin actually lands on its side. I looked up the odds of that. It's like 1 in 6,000 tosses. Which I think is pretty great. But it is very smart script writing, the way that it's designed to entice us to want to see who is our protagonist, because we don't know when it starts.
Yeah, it works so well to just bring us into the story, and I think by the time we actually meet him, by the time we see him at his dinner, he's so charming and so bumbling. That you just latch on and really enjoy that ride. And it makes for all of these sort of major plot points, right? The major elements where he is, he's presented with the fact that the dam is in fact already in motion, and Saunders presents the bill that he was squirreled away to miss the discussion on the floor of the Senate. That's a major point of his growing awareness when he has the meeting with Payne and Payne confesses his compromise. That's a major point. And when he finally, is confronted by Saunders in the train station as he's about to leave, and she convinces him that he's the man to lead change in Senate around this, but he has to do something big. And they go off to get a drink, and that leads obviously to the filibuster. It is just textbook perfect to me, and I just have it. I'm sucked in every step of the way.
Yeah, I agree.
Script is written by Sidney Buchman. Sidney Buchman has written, obviously, a lot of quite popular films. Buchman. Yeah, You know what? I look at it, I see like 3 extra N's in it. It's Bunchmann. That's how I see it. That's not how it's spelled, but that's how I see it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
He wishes he had more N's. Sidney
He does.
Sidney
yes.
Buchman. Holiday, Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, Talk of the Town. A lot of Cary Grants.
He was another blacklisted. That's come up quite a bit in the last few shows. He was blacklisted because he refused to provide names, and he was fined, given a year suspended sentence, and then he finally returned to screenwriting in the 60s, working on Cleopatra and The Group.
You like his stuff, then, is what you're telling me.
I think he has some good stuff. You know what I find really interesting about the way that the Oscars worked back then is that he was nominated for an Oscar for Best Writing Screenplay. And Louis R. Foster, who wrote the unpublished story, A Gentleman from Montana, was nominated for Best Writing Original Story and ended up winning the Oscar. Sidney Buchman lost to Sidney Howard, who wrote Gone with the Wind. It seems so strange to me that they split those into 2 writing categories back then. It's like saying, well, Stephen King wrote the original story, so we're going to nominate him for that Oscar, but then we're going to nominate Frank Darabont for writing the actual screenplay for another Oscar.
And then see Stephen King win.
Right. It's so interesting to me that they actually had that as a separate writing category back
That's
then.
Fascinating. I had no idea.
And the interesting thing is Louis R. Foster is the only person who won an Oscar for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington for Best Writing Original Story.
Wow. That's funny.
Yeah.
Who knew? Besides you, I guess.
Besides me, yes.
Who else you want to talk about?
Well, Dimitri Tiomkin, Russian composer who has written just a bunch of amazing scores, did a great bit of Americana for this. I really like the music. I think he did a bit kind of like what happened in Gone with the Wind, where he actually took some nice little Americana tunes and integrated them into the score, and I think it works really nicely in this.
I agree with you. I enjoyed this. I'm not a big fan of marches and pomp and circumstance of much Americana, but this was a nice score.
Yeah, I think that sort of stuff works well in context of the film.
Yeah.
Joseph Walker, cinematographer, we've talked about him on It Happened One Night and all the amazing things that he has done in his life as far as his patents and all that sort of stuff. But I gotta say, watching this film, I was like, it's nice watching a film where I feel like there's really a guy who's doing some really interesting things with the camera behind it, unlike Ninotchka, because I just like, God, the lighting was so much more interesting.
Yeah.
The framing was much more interesting. It just didn't feel as stagey.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, some of that credit I think goes to, I think it goes to Lionel Banks in the art department, or you know, who else gets that production design credit, because this film I think did a really good job. I mean, most of it was shot on set, some of it was shot on location in I think Baltimore and Washington D.C., but most of it was shot on set. They built a Senate chamber, and you know, there's a lot of pride in the design of that Senate chamber, and it looks terrific.
Huge
set, and particularly the continuity between the main Senate chamber proper and all of the various hallways and cloakrooms and offices off of these things. And I think they just did a terrific job with this set. Really, really thorough.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very good point. But then even beyond those, I mean, you get some really interesting dark scenes lit where we see Taylor on the phone or something, and it's just like surprisingly dark. And then some great framing, which I think is tribute to Capra as well as Walker. I love the scene when Smith is talking to Payne's daughter, and he stays on the hat the whole time. We're following Smith's hands as he's holding his hat, and he's fumbling, and we get
Yes.
the entire subtext of what's going on in that conversation just by watching his hat.
That
just
is
fantastic filmmaking.
So true, so true. And the way he drops it, and the way she giggles as you watch. I mean, it makes it so easy to visualize what is going on in that scene. It feels almost like a radio drama for that sequence. It's just perfect.
I wanted to, jumping back over to the acting category, I think we absolutely have to bring up the fantastic Harry Carey as the vice president, or president of the Senate, as he is in this film. Not normally an actor who is in this sort of film. Typically, he was in the Westerns, but he made a transition really well to somebody who feels right at home in the Senate. He's so good as the I guess you could say, the person embodying the audience's reaction to everything that's going on in the Senate. It's just, I mean, he has very few words, but everything, I mean, he got nominated for a supporting actor Oscar because everything is going on in his face as he's watching what Jeff is doing in Congress. It's so good.
I love that he is, as president of the Senate, comic relief, because I can't help but laugh every time I see him smile knowingly and have to cover his mouth because of what's going on in the Senate chamber. It's just great.
It's so good. He's just right on all the way through. I just really loved him in this. And then I think the last person that I wanted to bring up was Dub Taylor, who he's got a very bit part in this, almost to a point where you wouldn't even recognize that he's in there. I think he's one of the press people, and you catch him a few times, most notably when Smith storms into the press room and tries to beat up that one reporter. Dub Taylor is just one of those faces that is I grew up with as somebody who is just like this classic Western face. But you can't take it with you. You see him as the xylophone player. You see him popping in here. He's another guy like Eddie Arnold who just shows up as a bit player and just lives the role. He's just great.
And once you see his face, you will not forget him. You will not forget him in Back to the Future 3. You will not forget him in Maverick, in The Wild Bunch. I mean, he's in, well, I mean, the guy's got 251 credits. The guy's in everything.
He really is.
If it was a Western, he was probably in it.
Yeah, pretty much.
He was in The Rescuers. He was a voice in The Rescuers.
That's right, he was.
That's my five-hole.
Is it?
Bernard, Miss Bianca? Please.
Yes. I think that was Hot List of Actors. One more note about Capra. This is his last film with Columbia Pictures. We talked about with It Happened One Night how he got along really well with Harry Cohn, who was running Columbia. Their relationship was strained a little bit just because of the way that Capra would spend money. I mean, he wasn't an overspender, but he would push it, and I think Cohn panicked quite a bit about things. Like Cohn told him that he could only shoot as many takes as he wanted, but he could only print one take. And so, Capra found a way to get around that by basically he would shoot multiple takes in the same shot. Like he would keep the camera rolling as soon as one was done, and have them do it again and again, so that when they printed the take, he was getting like 3 takes. And so, he would find ways like that to kind of get his way a little bit. And Cohn and he had I wouldn't say it was a falling out, but I think that Capra really decided after this that it was time for him to step out and do some more on his own. I mean, he was a big name at the time. He really was. And because of filming the Liberty Bell ringing here, from this, he ended up creating Liberty Films.
Huh, fancy that.
And actually, along with Jimmy Stewart, he also went off to war. And he ended up shooting a bunch of wartime documentaries. I think Why We Fight. I think he shot 7 of these films. And he integrated a lot of Nazi footage. And it really took a toll on him. So after this, his films get much darker.
It Happened One Night. We did talk at great length about this wonderful filmmaker, and you can listen to that. It was episode 94. That was a while ago. That was back in August of 2013. Search for that on the website. Yeah,
a little while ago.
I know. All right, how did it do? We've talked about one Oscar. It had 11 nominations?
It had 11 nominations. This film, was received well at the Oscars, at least, although it only won the one for Louis Foster. Columbia Pictures, Frank Capra was nominated for Outstanding Production, and he was nominated for Best Director as well. Jim Stewart, Best Actor. He didn't win. Jimmy Stewart ended up winning the very next year for Philadelphia Story, and some people say that he won that because everybody kind of wanted him to win for this film, but who knows? Sidney Buchman, like I said, was nominated for Best Writing Screenplay. Carey and Claude Rains were both nominated for Best Supporting Actor. The winner, of course, was Thomas Mitchell, who's great in this as Diz, but of course, he was also in Gone with the Wind. But of course, Thomas Mitchell won Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his role in Stagecoach that he had played.
Right.
He was one of those really busy people in 1939. Lionel Banks lost Best Art Direction to Gone with the Wind. Gene Havlick and Al Clark lost Best Film Editing to Gone with the Wind. Dimitri Tiomkin lost Best Music Scoring to The Wizard of Oz. And John P. Lividary lost Best Sound Recording to When Tomorrow Comes. It was a film that was received modestly. I mean, when it premiered, they had the premiere in D.C., and all of the press people and all of the senators absolutely hated it. They were so offended by it, and they thought that the film was just saying all the wrong things, which strikes me as interesting that the senators were saying that. It's like,
It feels like if you're the senator to bring that up, this is the one who smelt it, dealt it kind of a situation.
Right. That's exactly what it seems like. It's like, really? You're going to say that?
Are you sure you're upset about that, Senator?
But yeah, I mean, even the senator from Montana and his family, they were so upset that they walked out of the screening. I mean, they all felt like, Capra was making a dig on their system. And obviously time has changed, and it was received well by audiences. So at least there's that. But it did kind of make it harder for them to get out of the gate. And Capra was kind of flabbergasted. He really was taken by surprise by the whole thing. But this thing cost $1.9 million to make at the time, which is about $31.8 million in our dollars. It ended up grossing domestically about $9 million, so it was still a handsome amount of money to make, which is about $150.8 million. So all told, it did pretty well for itself. Not as good as Gone with the Wind, but it did have an adjusted profit per finished minute of about 922.5 thousand. Per finished minute, so it still did pretty well.
It's one of the it is a super frustrating year to talk about, but a super frustrating film to talk about because I think it holds up so well over time, particularly compared to Gone with the Wind. For me, in terms of just enjoying watching the film.
Yeah, absolutely. There was an actual Jeff Smith who ran for office in 2004. A documentary filmmaker followed him and made a film called Can Mr. Smith Get to Washington Anymore? And this was a Missouri politician. Jeff Smith was a Democrat running in Missouri, and this filmmaker, Frank Capra, followed him. And Jeff Smith, unfortunately, did not end up getting into office. And then after the fact, actually several years after the film even came out, August 2009, Jeff Smith pled guilty and was sentenced to a year and a day in prison for his involvement in federal election law violations committed during the congressional campaign depicted in the film and the subsequent cover-up. To my point earlier, there is no Mr. Smith out there anymore. Not even the real Jeff Smith.
Humanity. That's horrible.
I know.
That's so dark.
It really is. It's sad that it's like just further proof.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I was going to say, I was curious about filibusters. It's like, okay, so who had the longest filibuster? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Because there was a filibuster fairly recently, back in 2013.
Right. Well,
March
that wasn't the
2013.
longest, right?
No, it wasn't. That was Rand Paul filibuster on proposed CIA Director John Brennan's confirmation. But the longest spoken filibuster in American history was by Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, who went on for 24 hours and 18 minutes in filibustering the Civil Rights Act of 1957.
Wow. I'm sure that was a real barn burner.
I'm sure. But it's interesting because I was like, that's a really long time to be standing there talking. How does he do it? And so they had some little notes about his preparation. Thurmond took a steam bath earlier in the day to rid his body of excess liquid to avoid the potential for any accidents in the chamber. He went to the floor armed with cough drops and malted milk tablets. He allowed others to make short remarks and ask questions during his time, allowing him to sneak off to the cloakroom to gobble a sandwich. And he had his aide wait in the cloakroom with a pail when he was about to step down from the dais in case of an emergency evacuation. Things you have to think about when you're getting ready to stand in front of people and talk for 24 straight hours.
Yikes.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I brought up the list. A lot of them get up in that over 20 hour mark, right? The top 5 are all over. Well, no, the top 3 are over 25, but 18 hours number 4 and 16 hours number 5. That's a long time to talk.
That is a really long time to talk. I find it such an interesting element to our political system.
Yeah, it really is. It's very Roman.
Yeah, and the funny thing, of course, is that the Senate passed the bill and Thurman's marathon didn't change a single vote.
Right.
Which I think is
that's also very
a lot
Roman.
Of these. Yeah, right. Thumbs down.
That's right. Black marble to you. Now go throw up. Let's rank it. I think we should do that.
Let's do it.
All right. I have my black and white marble, and I am ready to drop them for you, Andy, at flickchart.com/the next reel. And you should go there, and you should line them up and see if your films match our top films, and as we stack rank them. And I think this one's going to do fairly well. That's my bet.
Too. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Hot Fuzz? I'm saying Mr. Smith.
I am too.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind?
I'm saying Mr. Smith.
So am I. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Fight Club, Pete?
Oh, dear. I note that you are not speaking.
I'm saying Mr. Smith, actually.
Are you really?
I am.
Huh.
I love Fight Club. I think there's so much going on in Fight Club, but Mr. Smith ends up moving me in a way that I like to be moved.
All right. I will go with Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? I'm saying Mr. Smith.
I do like how Butch and Sundance move me. I mean, it's no Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. But I will be going with Mr. Smith.
All right. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Touch of Evil?
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Absolutely.
That's actually an easy one for me.
That is an easy one, yeah. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Seven?
Now it's more challenging.
It is more challenging
here. At no point in Mr. Smith did we need to find out what's in the box.
Nope.
Then again, the same could be said about 7. We had to find out what was in the box.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time not picking Capra.
I'm surprised that I'm torn on this one, actually, because 7 is in my top 5.
Yes,
but right now I'm feeling like Mr. Smith. There's something about the classic sensibilities that Capra brings here about this fight of innocence to do something better. I don't think that it's people always say Capricorn with Capra films, and we talked about Capra-esque and the whole thing last time.
Yeah.
I don't find it corny. I find there's an honesty to the innocence presented in the film that creates a power of its own.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Mr. Smith did very well in my own ranking. But I'm going to have to say Mr. Smith.
I'm so torn. I'm like back to 7 now.
You are? Just because I said that?
No, I was waxing philosophical about Mr. Smith, but I was debating with myself. I'm still debating with myself. I'm torn.
Huh.
I'll go with Mr. Smith. It's a strong film. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it really is a really good film.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Raising Arizona.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
I agree. What is happening? I was not expecting this.
Strangely, this is the peril of Flickchart because that was an easy one for me. That is an easy rank for me.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Pete, or Network.
Network. You're gonna have to get up pretty early to give us a new number one, my friend. A new number one that's a tougher battle.
I'm half leaning to Mr. Smith though.
Really?
Or not. I am. But I'll go with Network.
Mr.
It makes me a little nervous to like all of a sudden. Our top 5 has been rattled so much the last few months. Whew.
Okay.
I'll give it to Network. Mr. Smith is number 2. We have a new number 2. Ben Lott will be happy to know that Mad Max Fury Road has been bumped out of the top 5. Now it's Network, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Raising Arizona, 7, and Jaws.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Man, Jaws is at number 5. How the mighty have fallen.
That is amazing. That's just amazing. It's a strong top 5. It's a strong top 10. It's really...
It is. It's a strong set of films. I am happy with that ranking, actually. That feels really good. We'll see if I'm just completely hungover in the morning.
I'm thrilled with it. I think it's a good film. Being in the top 5, I think, is definitely a fair place. This, to me, exemplifies the great films of 1939 more so than what we've talked about thus far. I really just feel very passionately about this film.
Yeah, me too. And we probably should have put this last in the series because now we go on to more 1935, and I'm not confident that they're going to live up to my feelings about this film.
I was actually thinking we should have done it last week for the 4th of July.
That's a good point.
It seemed a little more fitting, but that's all right. It's all good.
Where do we go for our next week?
We are going to get into the gangster world a little bit with the Roaring Twenties. I'm excited to see this one. I haven't seen it before.
Me too. Very excited to see that. Until then, I'm going to go to bed.
All right. I got to go out and drink this over.
All right, so I'm going to start, and we're going to move down.
Okay.
So I'm going to start right in the middle. It's a 3-star from Bethaloan. Not up to the standard of It's a Wonderful Life. There are nice things about this movie. The ending is weird and sudden, though, and I can't help but thinking of Rand Paul while watching this film. So what's so great about Mr. Smith? He doesn't seem to do anything except make people feel like confessing their evil doings, and then he faints. Pretty weak. I definitely prefer It's a Wonderful Life. Capra's better film.
Yeah, take that, Mr. Smith,
That's
you weakling.
There's a weakling. What did he do? He wore sensible shoes for the day.
He brought an apple and thermos. Whoop-de-doo.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right, what do you got?
Well, I've got a 1 star by Richard A. Smith who says, I love this movie. So I think he's still working on what star ratings actually mean. And then he follows that up with, how can I make my 13-year-old daughter watch this with me? She doesn't want to. And then, of course, the best part of this is all of the comments. Seriously? Wanting parenting advice on an Amazon review site? You rate this movie at 1 star because you can't get your daughter to watch it with you? I give your parenting skills 1/2 of 1 star and your comprehension of how to rate a movie 1/2 of 1 star. If it were possible to give 0 stars, I would. But Amazon does not allow 0-star ratings. And then another person replied, force her at gunpoint. That usually works. Oh, my goodness. Sometimes you got to wonder.
Right. Wow. Thanks, Amazon.
It is hard to believe we have been having in-depth conversations about movies since 2011.
You are telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
Season 5 had some great adaptations, like our Meryl Streep Oscar-nominated performances series. We covered adaptations like Kramer vs. Kramer, Sophie's Choice, and The French Lieutenant's Woman.
It's a real Sophie's Choice between those books. You see what I did there?
Yeah. And I don't think it's quite at the level of a real Sophie's Choice.
We also did Snowpiercer for our Bong Joon-ho series, adapted from the French graphic novel Le Transpersonnage. Man, I love that movie.
We had our 2-part 1939 series that included adaptations like Gone with the Wind, Ninotchka, The Women, and The Hound of the Baskervilles.
A number of those 1939 movies, like Goodbye, Mr. Chips, also tied into our recent 1940 Academy Award Best Picture nominee series.
Our naughty children horror series had creepy adaptations like The Bad Seed, Village of the Damned, The Innocents, and Children of the Corn.
For our Hayao Miyazaki series, we talked about his take on Lupin III with The Castle of Cagliostro, plus his own The Wind Rises.
Some great listener choice picks too, Viridiana and The Great Escape.
And for our David Mamet Wright series, The Verdict, The Untouchables, and Glengarry Glen Ross.
Plus, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang from our Shane Black series, adapted from Brett Halliday's novel, Bodies Are Where You Find Them.
Dive into the sources for all of these at thenextreel.com/originals.
Every book you buy helps support the show. Check out thenextreel.com/originals today and find your next read.